All right. So as I was saying, I'm just going to try and explain this one other way, okay? So what is our calculation of profit? Profit is income minus expenses, all right? These expenses is your fixed costs plus your variable costs, okay? That is what your expenses are broken down into, okay? So now basically all that we are saying is these expenses, right? We want to ensure that our profit is 10 million, okay? So if we want to have a profit of 10 million, okay, then what we are basically saying is to ensure that we have a profit of 10 million per annum, we could then say, okay, we know what our fixed costs are, we know what our variable costs are. If we then add this 10 million, all right, like as if it's an expense, so to speak, right, we now know the total that our income must cover in order to ensure that we get this 10 million. Does that make sense now? Okay? Does that make sense now? So then what we then say to ourselves is, okay, now going back to our activity, okay? We then say to ourselves, okay, what is, okay, let me hold off that. We know that we have our selling price. Let me use a different color here now. Okay, we know that our selling price, right, is basically our income. Okay, is basically our income. So then we know that when we are calculating break even, which calculates when our fixed costs and our variable costs have been covered, we need to use marginal income. All right, and we use that to divide our total fixed costs. Okay, and the reason why we only use marginal income is because that we know that marginal income, I'm just going to write the formula here, is your selling price. Let me also do that in a different color. Let me do it in green. Hey, what's up with this? Behave. Selling price minus your variable cost, okay, per unit. So that's then going to give us our marginal income unit, okay? So in other words, when we are now here, we've already catered to our variable costs. We no longer need to worry about that. Does that make sense now? It still doesn't make sense. Just this part doesn't make sense. Okay, what about it doesn't make sense for you? How did we cater for variable costs? Isn't here we subtracted it from our selling price? Does that make sense? Can you see that? So now when we're looking at the marginal income, we don't need to worry about variable costs anymore because we've already deducted it. Does that make sense now? Okay? So now that's why we only say total fixed cost divided by your marginal income per unit. Makes sense? All right. But still, what do we want? We want to ensure that we achieve a 10 million profit as well. So can you see now why I'm saying we then now need to take this 10 million and actually add it to our total fixed costs? Does it make sense? Because remember, at the end of the day, remember, break even, all we're saying is we want to arrive at a point of zero. We're not making a profit and we're not making a loss. Does that make sense? But now we've said to ourselves in this business, nah, that's not enough. We actually want to make a profit, and we want to make a profit of 10 million. Does that make sense? So this is obviously greater than 0. Okay, so we then need to incorporate that, which is why we threw that over. So that's why we're now adding this 10 million to the total fixed cost. Are you guys still with me now? We're together. Okay. Right. So again, now in your answer books, I don't know what these guys have done here, because when we calculated our total fixed cost, what did we get? We got a total of, let me use a different color here, because now we want to calculate our total fixed cost. Sorry, our number of units that we need to produce in order to, so 10 million plus the total fixed cost, and here we calculated total fixed cost to be 146,000 for the month. Okay, wait, now I see what they've done. So this is for the month. Remember, this is 10 million per year. Okay, so they said how many units do we need to produce for the year? So then here they said times 12. Okay, so I see in your answer book they have 1 million something something for fixed costs. Okay, all right, then that divided by our marginal income, which we said is then going to be your, I think it's 585 point, that's the selling price, 0.13 if I'm not mistaken. You guys wrote it down, all right? And then our variable cost, we said it was 200 and something. What is it, 200 and? 34.13, okay? And then, so now I'm going to zoom out. 585.33. Okay, thank you, sir. 33. Okay. After you've calculated that, you should then get the number of units that we need to produce in order to have a 10 million profit at the end of the year. Which is how much? Somebody tell me. Let me put them big brackets. Okay, so I would start by getting your marginal income. I would solve that first. Then I would go on to solve this, the stuff in the brackets. Then I would go on to add these two together. All right. Then I would then divide by whatever result I have at 0.1. That's how I would do it. So somebody tell me, how many units do we get? How many units do you guys get? Okay, people are typing, writing and calculating, but nobody wants to talk to me. I don't know what I've done. 462.41 tons. Okay, that's tons. All right. Right. Again, or you could say, yeah. All right. Or actually, yeah. Or you could say units, actually. It's units. Because this is per unit, per unit, per unit. So this is units. Sorry. This is units. Okay. And again, we don't have 0.4 of a unit. So I would then round this off to 463. Okay. I wouldn't round it down, I would round it up, because remember they're saying how many units do we need to produce and sell. So if we remove this and round it downwards, then it would be 6.2 as you're saying, but then can you see that means that our revenue will also be slightly less. Does that make sense? So since our revenue will be slightly less, that means we won't make 10 million, we'll make slightly less than 10 million. That's why it's better for us to round up. So does that make sense now? So yes, we will make slightly more than 10 million, but then we know for certain we'll hit that 10 million. All right. All right, happiness, guys? Okay, so now, the last question, they're just asking you guys, okay, let me just read it. We don't necessarily need to jump into it. Fixed costs are generally costs which management can do little about, okay? However, variable costs leaves a lot of scope for cost saving, okay? For all the variable costs identified above, suggest ways in which Renegade dealers can reduce these costs. So literally now it's about going to each of those variable costs and saying, okay, I remember we had like import tariffs and things to that effect. You then say, okay, why don't we use the local supply as opposed to importing this stuff? Okay. Again, we had other materials that we were purchasing. All right. Could we not look into alternative products that would still allow us to obviously produce our final product? So it's really now you just sitting down, applying your mind and saying, okay, how could we potentially save in this regard or that regard according to that specific variable cost, okay? There's nothing too hectic there. All we need to see is logic, and then you should get your marks over there, okay? And obviously your answer should be dependent on how many marks is actually allocated to that, okay? Right. Cool. Are there any questions in relation to that exercise? Can we move to 4.7? Everybody happy? Okay, awesome stuff. So 4.7, let's just go to the required there quickly. Let's see. Okay, 4.7. All right, there, basically, if we look at the required, they're saying calculate the break-even point in units for both opportunities. Okay. Then they say calculate the break-even point in sales revenue. Then finally they say construct a CVP cost volume profit graph for each of the two opportunities. Okay. Round all final answers to the nearest 1 rand. Okay. The business bases their costs on chargeable hours, not hours worked. Interesting. Okay, now, all that you need to do there to calculate the break-even point in units, literally, we're going back to our formula. I'm just going to talk about it because I can see some of you are looking at me and you're angry. You want to go home. I'm joking. But yeah, I can see you tired, so it's fine. So again, the formula for break-even in units, fixed costs divided by your marginal income. Okay, in other words, your selling price per unit minus your variable cost per unit. Okay, so all you need to do there, fortunately for you, they've already given you your sales per unit. Okay, look under opportunity 1, that 400 rand, which you see under per unit, that's your selling price per unit. Okay, then your variable cost per unit, that you have to actually, because there they just say less costs. So that's going to be both your fixed costs. There you can see fixed manufacturing overhead, okay? And there you can see sales commission, and you can see fixed administrative costs, okay? We don't want those fixed amounts, okay? We only want the variable. So there you're going to need to take the 128 plus the 60, which is indirect, variable indirect manufacturing cost. Then you're going to need to take the 20 rand sales commission. We're only giving commission when somebody has made a sale. Can you see it's attached to how much we produced? Can you see that? Okay, because remember in cost volume profit analysis, we assume whatever we produced, we've sold. Okay, right. So those amounts, you're going to add the 20, the 60, and the 108. That's your That's going to make your variable cost. Okay. So then, yeah, you're going to say your selling price of 400 Rand minus that total that you got there, and then that's going to give you your divided by. You're going to divide your fixed cost by that amount that you get when you minus your selling price minus your variable cost. Then you'll get your break even in units. You do the same thing for opportunity 2. Cool beans. Then calculate the break even point in sales revenue. Again, what you can do is you can, whatever you calculated in the first, you can then say times your selling price. In other words, times 400 Rand. Then you get your revenue break even point. Alternatively, you can use the formula, all right? Fixed cost divided by your marginal income ratio. Remember, all that you need to do to turn your marginal income that we have there in the first section is to then just divide by the selling price. So selling price minus your variable cost divided by selling price. You'll get your ratio. All right? Remember in the first exercise we did, it was the 60% that we calculated. So it's not hard, okay? So you could do that and then you could just divide by your fixed costs, which you already know, okay? And then you obviously do that for opportunity 2 as well. And then the last point, they want you to construct a cost volume profit graph. Okay, here again, it's not tough. All right, it's not tough. I do believe the illustration in the textbook there, so I don't want to hold you for too long. Okay. Okay, so here I hope. Man. Okay, let's remove that. I need more space. So yeah, let me just do it over here. Okay. I'm just gonna go through this, get to the point on this. Your x-axis, that's gonna be the number of units, okay? Units. Okay, your y-axis, this is gonna be your cost or your revenue, okay? Because remember, that's the rands bit. Actually, let me move that somewhere else, somewhere neater. Cost, revenue. Okay. Okay, and that's your rands. Okay. Now, remember fixed costs. Fixed costs are the same regardless of whether we produce a unit or we don't. So here, our fixed costs, if we look at it, it's that fixed manufacturing overhead, which is the 80,000, and then it's also the fixed administration costs. So 80,000 plus 144,000, that should give you 224,000. So it's going to be a very ugly graph, but bear with me. So here you're going to have 224,000. This is your fixed cost. Okay. Then the other line that you're going to have is, remember, for every unit that you sell, you're earning 400 Rand. Okay. So you're going to have a total revenue line. Okay, starting from 0. If we produce 0 units, therefore we don't sell anything, then we're going to get 0 revenue. Does that make sense? All right. But if we produce, so let's see, 400 divided by 800, sorry, 800,000 divided by 400, you're going to get 2,000. Okay, so if we produce 2,000 units, okay, let's just say this is going to give us 800 in total revenue. Does that make sense? Okay. Then, now the next thing that they want you to then calculate is then to also calculate the variable cost. Okay. So variable cost, okay, Remember, or should I do this? This is now your, actually, yeah, let me start first with the variable cost. Variable cost, remember, is much like the total revenue line. If we produce units, then obviously we're going to incur a cost. Now, our variable cost is obviously less than our selling price. So our line maybe might be something like this, for instance, and this is your variable cost. Okay, for every unit, remember we said, I'm using opportunity one, we said 60 plus 128 plus the 20. Okay, so already you can see that that's less than the 400 selling price. So can you see why the line is like, I don't know how to, it's more, what do you call it? More steep? Is that correct? No, it's less steep actually. Is that correct? Okay. Then the last thing that you want to do is remember our total cost. Let me write this out. Total cost is equals to variable cost plus fixed cost. Okay. So if we want to now see what our total cost is, we then say, okay, our total cost begins over there. Total cost line. Okay. And why did I draw from this point over here? Because remember, this is our fixed cost. So regardless of how much we produce, right, our total costs, our costs need to be incorporated. So that's why I did that there. And can you see that your total cost over here is covering both your fixed costs? I'm just, hey, use a different color to just shade. It's covering all our costs. Okay. Now, the point at which your total cost intersects with your total revenue, that is our break-even point. And can you see what's awesome here? You can see the total number of units that you need to produce, all right, at this point here in order to break even. And you can also see the total revenue that you need to achieve in order to break even. Okay, so that's a very ugly example of example 4.4. Okay, so if you want to just have another look at what we've just done, you can also look at example 4.4. Okay, guys, are there any questions or thoughts? Is everybody good? Okay, all right. So I'm supposed to have another 2 sessions with you guys, but obviously it's Friday, and I'm sure the week has been long enough. So all that I'm going to ask of you is one, give me back my register, and then the ICE tasks. I've given you guys 3 ICE tasks. All of them are on Unit 3. Please go and do them. The due date is midnight next week, Friday. Okay. That's also to help you in preparation for your second test. I don't know if it's a test or an assessment. Officer, go ahead. Okay. So please go and do that. I'm going to give you again another ICE task next week, Friday, or whenever next I see you. Okay. That'll be based on Unit 4. Okay. So, yeah. Please just go and do those. If anything, you guys have my email address, so feel free to email me. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, or enjoy the weekend. All right. All right. Just give me a second. 1 second.